Hi, and welcome to the first episode of the Art Podcast with me, Lisa Fevral. The name of the podcast is As If. I tried to make it as quiet as possible in terms of the background noise. Hopefully, it works. We'll see when I'm going to be editing and stuff like that, and I'm going to try and get this podcast to be better with each time. But today, I'm just going to introduce a few things to you and explain what this podcast is going to be about. First of all, obviously, this podcast is going to be about art. We're going to talk about some of the things that my viewers from my channel are interested in. I'm going to be answering some questions. We're also going to weave in some music discussions, some shows and movies discussions. And then we're also going to talk about random things that I feel like talking about that don't really fit the restraints of my channel and the types of videos that I make on my channel. I do make a lot of random things, but I feel like it's sometimes a little bit too much or a little bit too random, and the algorithm doesn't really like that. So I decided to make a separate podcast where we're gonna dive into my personal interest in art and I'm gonna talk about it and answer some questions and whatever, since my degree in art should be going somewhere, should be doing something for my life, except for just, giving me an immense amount of debt. So we're gonna do that here. I'm gonna introduce a bunch of things to you, first starting with the sections or segments of the podcast. So I've asked you guys if you've ever had any questions about art and questions that you would want to be answered by me, and this is gonna be the art section, so let's cue the little jingle that I made.
Yeah, she's a full-on Monet. It's like the painting, see? From far away it's okay, but up close it's a big old mess.
So this section, the jingle, actually comes from, I made it, but the quote that's being integrated into the little beat, it's from Clueless. It's by Cher, when Cher explains to Ty that the girl that she's asking about, that she's a Monet, that from afar it looks pretty good, but up close it's a big old mess, which is, of course, she's referencing Monet, that painter that, was part of the Impressionism movement. And I thought it was funny, so I added it here, okay? It's gonna be the little jingle that plays every time this segment is gonna be in the podcast. So I thought there was a couple of questions that would fit this first introductory episode, because I'm going to be delving into more specific artists and into more specific art movements later on in the season. So I kind of wanted to address some questions that were a little bit more general and about art as not a movement per se, but as maybe an industry or a way of life or whatever the hell you want to call it, but art in general, There were questions like, for example, so one of the questions was from Luisa Del Paz, and she asked, since I'm not so familiar with the contemporary visual arts, I'd love to know, where do you see them heading? Do you foresee any breakthroughs? How do you think the future is going to be like? How would you like it to be? So contemporary visual arts is a really weird thing, to be honest, because it feels like a lot has been said and a lot has been done already, especially in terms of the art movement and artists and what they kind of add to the art conversation. There's a lot of issues in terms of artists repeating themselves and stuff like that, it's quite common. And it's a difficult question to answer, because I've been thinking about it myself, like, what the hell is even the point of making art nowadays if everything's been done? But then the question kind of goes into another topic, of what is the point of making art in general and what is art. And I think that if you think about it a lot, it's just like any other thing in life. It kind of devolves into this answer of well, it doesn't really matter and it doesn't really make any sense to be making anything because there is nothing new under the sun. And I think that a lot of this is dependent on whether you see art as a thing that could be done once, or if you see art as a constant part of everyone's life, you know. A lot of people and a lot of artists think that art is something that is made by everyone every day, which I think I'm kind of in that group of people who thinks that art is something that's done every single day by people. I don't know. I think sometimes I can see that there's like tendencies within certain years and whatever. Like you can tell that, for example, Anthropocene has been really popular and kind of trending in the art scene. You know, a lot of artists started talking about it. A lot of art magazines were making their issues about it. There's a lot of people who just talk about it a lot. Even goddamn Grimes put it in, like, you know, her name of the album was Anthropocene. And it's one of those things where there's definitely new terms that get popularized from time to time, but I don't know if it actually, at least I don't think it contributes in any dramatic way to the discourse, because usually things have always been already discussed in another paper or somewhere in the world, you know, where we don't usually look for texts or for theory or art theory, you know. It's one of those things in general where sometimes you feel like you stumbled upon something new and sometimes you feel like you're just repeating somebody else. And I don't think there's really any right or wrong in that regard. I guess I can tell that there might gonna be like a new movement in terms of data. Something in like evolving the whole memes thing, you know, since it's so hard to monetize and make it profitable. It is the ultimate data movement, you know. It's impossible to make it cool long enough for it to be profitable within the market, so it kind of becomes this data-esque movement and data-esque new medium. So maybe something with that, but to be honest, I don't think that it has enough. Yeah, I guess the longevity is kind of important because a lot of works wouldn't actually get enough attention to be put into textbooks or anything like that. So I don't know if that's actually going to stick around or if it's just going to be an ephemeral kind of movement that people theorize about, but don't actually have anyone who is the main artist of the movement or the main collective of the movement. I don't know. In any case, I think that the future of art, how would I like it to be? I don't know. I approach art in a very nihilistic way, to be honest, the same way as I do life. I believe that the only reason why I am so into art and why I even participate in it, to be honest, after especially getting the degree and being kind of disappointed by everyone in the industry, I think, not everyone, but you know, I think that sometimes I forget why I like art, because it can be so pretentious, and I really hate a lot of people who are acting like they're coming up with something new when they're just wasting time and being a nuisance to society, you know. But at the same time, there is this parallel between being alive and doing all of these things and putting effort into everyday life, and it's parallel to art and putting effort into art. And I think that this parallel makes a lot of sense to me. Like, I am staying alive for the same reason I do art. There's no reason. I guess I'm just enjoying it. And when I don't enjoy it, I still stick around. I don't know. Okay, this is always going to devolve into a very philosophical conversation that uses a lot of nihilistic terms, nihilistic theories to talk about why do we even do art in general? What is the point of it all? And then sometimes, you know, I especially don't see a point in it when I'm in a good state mentally. I think that I'm kind of thinking about what can I do to make the society around me better and whatever. But then when I'm in a really bad state, mentally and physically, all of a sudden art starts making a lot more sense, because it's one of those things that kind of keeps you company and makes you, I don't know, makes you kind of feel like your really difficult experiences are understood and supported by other people, I guess, in terms of just being in this shit together, just knowing that life is like this, but we're all in it together, and you're not alone in these experiences, in terms of just not being the first person to deal with something difficult and whatever. I think that art starts making a lot more sense when you're in a different dimension of difficulty. When your life is going well, you kind of start thinking about, like, I could have been a fucking doctor or something like that and could have contributed more to society. But then when you are really unwell, you realize the importance of just those ephemeral things that all of a sudden get new meaning. And one day we're gonna talk about art, philosophically speaking, a little bit more in depth, and I'll get into stories about how, like, what moments pulled me back into art and what moments kind of showed me the beauty of it all, because it's such a weird relationship that I have with it. I have the same relationship with art as I do with life, to be honest. It's just sometimes you really get it on some kind of weird level, and sometimes you really don't. And yeah, that would be my answer to this. Okay, so another question was from a magical unicorn, and they asked, what do you think is the most important thing for students taking an art class in school to get out of the experience, regardless of whether or not the student is interested in art? So in my first year, I've had quite a few people in my classes that were not into arts and didn't want to pursue arts, but they took art classes because they wanted to, like, raise their GPA or something like that. First of all, I would say right away that it's not a good idea to take an art course to raise your GPA, because most likely that's not going to happen. A lot of the people who were in my class who were there for the GPA, they kind of got really disappointed because they didn't do well in that class. They usually get like C's or something. And the reason why is because like you might get lucky and get an A, but art is very difficult in terms of getting consistent grades. You get really different teachers, and if you don't agree with them or don't get along with them, or you don't engage enough in terms of the depth of the engagement, you might not even get a D, So I would say that don't take it if it's for your GPA, because you might actually mess up your GPA. Take something that's scientific enough that the answers in your test, when you answer it right, it's right, and when you answer it wrong, it's wrong, just so you can kind of get a predictable grade in that class. Don't take something that's so in the air all the time, like art, because it's difficult to do well there without a lot of luck and a lot of engagement. And honestly, sometimes I don't even know why you do well and why you do badly in some classes. It's just really dependent on the teacher, and I don't know. I almost choked just accidentally in the middle of the sentence. In any case, what I think that you should be getting out of those classes, if you are there to just get some experience, I would say that try to understand the way that theoretical art, like the theory behind art, works, because you're definitely gonna gain more appreciation for a lot more works and understand art a lot better, and you're gonna get a lot more from your trips to the galleries or just your general engagement with the arts. You're gonna get a lot more out of it if you get this basis of what the hell they're even trying to do. Because I think that the idea that you have of art before university, especially art that's contemporary art or conceptual art, not illustration, that's straight up illustration or straight up animation, for example, right? But like more art that deals with theory and concepts, if you go into a class that teaches something along those lines, like I guess honestly, like if you take first year classes like visual arts that are painting and stuff like that, you might not get a lot of conceptual art background in those classes. You might gonna get it, but you have to look at the description and what the professor is going to teach, because I think that getting the theory, especially on the ground level, would definitely change your experience with art and enrich it. And because to be honest, before I went to university, I had a very different idea of what art is. I definitely was one of those people who looked at a painting and was like, I could do that, you know? And the thing is, yes, you can do that. You can splatter paint on a canvas, for example. But the thing is, if you do that, if you just splatter paint on a canvas, you might not actually get a good grade as you think you would, just because it was done by Jackson Pollock or something like that. Because the thing is, every painting and every great artist, sculptor, like multimedia artist, installation artist, performer, whoever it is, what is unique about them is not always the end result of the art piece, because sometimes their goal is not to make an art piece that could be purchased and placed in a rich person's house or some shit like that, you know? Sometimes people, like in data, for example, they prefer to make something that is impossible to make valuable. Some people are obsessed with making performances or whatever that are valuable only in that moment to the people that are around them, the people that are engaging with it, and afterwards that moment doesn't exist anymore. There's a whole movement about that, about making moments but not actually having anything tangible, right? So I think that if you go into one of those art classes, either art history or visual arts, I hope that you choose something that's a little bit more engaging in terms of theory, art theory, because there's a lot of good ideas that you can bring with you into other disciplines or into your personal life in general. I think that if you are into physics, especially if you're into theoretical physics, I think that you're going to benefit from taking courses that are, for example, about the idea of the fold in the arts, which is like this idea of time folding on itself and whatever. I think that it might be something that helps you visually, for example, to work in your physics field, or make you feel a little bit more inspired about your work in the sciences. I think science and art, it's kind of a very similar field, especially when they're not applied, when they're theoretical. So I think that if you're, for example, in theoretical sciences, I think you will benefit from taking a few theoretical courses in the arts. And to be honest, it's just a good challenge to switch it up a little bit. Like my courses that I got into university with, that I actually used, for my grades and whatever, were all sciences, because that's what I was doing better in. But now I have a degree in art, so it's kind of, it fluctuates. Maybe in like 20 years I'm gonna go back to school and become a rocket scientist or something, just because I'm bored of arts. And I feel like at some point I will get bored of it, because actually I don't know, because I keep saying that I'm bored of it, and then in a couple of months it pulls me back in with some other shit, and I can never predict what's gonna happen, but it always happens. Something always happens in regards to my relationship with art, as you can tell by this point in this podcast. So basically, try to get into the theory and find theories that work for you, because there's a lot of theories, or a lot of like introductory theories, especially depends on the professor, that are kind of boring, but there's some that are so interesting that it could definitely enrich your everyday life, just in general. Could really help you with your day-to-day life, or with your practice in other fields, to be honest. Okay, so there's another question from Chrissy Elric. There's a few questions that she has asked. I would say that I'm gonna answer some other parts of this question, or this comment, in other podcasts, because I kind of integrated the questions based on the topics of the podcast. But today I'm gonna answer the question about what my opinion on art in terms of what makes art art? And do I have any limitations or thoughts on what should and shouldn't be called art? I'm gonna tell you that if I go into this theoretically, I want to say that there's not really a limit because you can't really define it. But if you're gonna ask me as a person, as just like, a biased person, yes, there's a limit, and I'm very judgmental about it. Like, if I try to explain it, it really comes down to case by case basis, to be honest, because we're gonna talk about some art pieces on this podcast, not today specifically, but in general, like all the episodes and whatever, that I absolutely hate, that I think that they shouldn't have been made, art pieces that I think that shouldn't have been allowed to be performed or done, art pieces that I think that are not art, art pieces that shouldn't be taught in schools or in universities. I have a lot of opinions on all of that, and I think that as much as I would like to answer this question straight on, being like, okay, so this is a system, this is what makes art art, and this is what is complete bullshit, I don't think I can put it into this two separate neat lists that kind of determine whether something is an art piece or not. However, with time, I think the more you watch different types of artworks that I'm going to be talking about, the more you hear about them, I feel like you're going to kind of gauge this sense of what I personally see as art and what I don't see as art. And I think that there's some art that I don't particularly like, but I can still see it as art, and I can still see merit in the work. I think that there's definitely, I don't know, there's a lot of kind of definitions of art out there, and there's some art that I can't engage with because I just don't want to, and I kind of feel like it's derivative or whatever. But then I still would say, well, it's still art, it's still, at least it tries to be something good. Maybe it doesn't quite reach it, but it doesn't mean that it's not art per se. It might not be good art, but it's still art, We're gonna talk about it more and more with each example of the artwork that I'm gonna bring up. There are some that are really wild and weird, and that you guys are gonna be shocked to hear about. And there's some that I really like, even though I would never make that myself as an artist, or even consider it as an artist, but I still think that it's good. So next week I'm gonna actually talk about an artist, and I'm gonna show you some kind of art piece that I like, or talk about an exhibition that I've been to that was fantastic, and tell you about why I liked it and why I disliked it. And it's gonna be very straightforward. We're not gonna be just talking about just theory, because I love theory, but I also like to talk shit sometimes about art too, especially my own art. I love talking shit about my art too. One time, well, you know what? One day I should make a podcast about my art, and then talk about the progression of my art and what I think I've done wrong or right in my practice. That's my dog scratching the bed. Anyway, let's move on to the music segment.
What? Are they insane? How are we supposed to survive without any tunes?
Okay, so for the music segment, we have Chloe from Bratz talking about how we're gonna survive without any tunes. It's in one of the Bratz episodes, and I thought that it would work for this segment really well. And every week we're gonna talk about some kind of musical release, talk about the concept of the release and if it works well, talk about maybe the artists and what I find interesting about them. And sometimes we're not going to have this segment, sometimes we are going to have this segment. There's going to be a couple of segments that are going to be changing and added in some episodes and removed from others. The only one that's going to be definitely in every single episode is the art segment, obviously. But yeah, so I wanted to talk about Sunmi because I love Sunmi and I think that she deserves more attention. I am so sick and tired of seeing so many other artists getting so many views and so much attention. I know that Sunmi is she's still getting a lot of views. I know that, okay? But I think that she deserves more. She's just so great. Her concepts are definitely something that I adore. I've made a video way back, maybe like a year ago, about her, and I named that video, I believe, something like the beauty of feminine horror, or feminine horror in Sunmi's music. I think that's what it was. I'm gonna link it in the description, but basically I made a video analyzing her like music videos and her career, where she kind of moved into this interesting space visually and musically, where she takes this hyper femininity and mixes it with horror and makes something really interesting that's just slightly eerie, or has like a bit of this minor tone or undertones, where every single song that she makes, even when she's going for a very cute concept, still has this twist that kind of gives it an edge, So for example, the thing that I want to talk about today is her album 1/6, and her release You Can't Sit With Us. My accent just keeps on sliding up and down. In any case, I really like that release so much. The music video, first of all, she's kind of made this like genre bending kind of music video, which she does a lot. I feel like I see it a lot in her music. So her music video featured this early 2000s aesthetic, very pink. A lot of the outfits were very early 2000s. Flip phones like landlines with a lot of, I don't know, like the bedazzled phones basically. Like she added a lot of sparkle everywhere and everything is super pink. And then she had this moment where she's at the, I don't even know what it's called, like a DVD renting place or something like that. And she gets kind of trapped in there because there's a bunch of zombies that are attacking the store. I love that. It's so like, at first it's so cute and girly, and the song is very synth based, but at the same time you kind of get a little bit of that flavor at the very beginning, where she's standing on a car and there's a bunch of zombies trying to get to her, and she's holding a rifle, and it's just fantastic. Something about the mixing of the hyper feminine and horror that just works for me so well. That's why I love like Jennifer's Body, for example, and that's why many women, I think, like Jennifer's Body, because it's just this horror of girlhood and the oppression happening, while at the same time you're always kind of made to be in this clean, perfect world of like pink and bows and sparkles, while at the same time you're like bleeding every month. Does that make any sense? I don't know, I just really like this dichotomy between something super fluffy and cute and something sinister underneath. It's really speaking to me, and I think you should check it out, because first of all the songs are great on that album that she released. I think that the only one I didn't like was Call, because I don't like the production. The production is very much 2011 Europop, like very EDM to inspired too, and I'm just not about it. I'm more of a 90s 80s kind of person, and I like R&B, like 90s R&B mixed with synth based stuff, or maybe some pop rock too. So for example, the song 1/6 is definitely really interesting in terms of just the concept. I like that she thought about weight, and like physical weight, gravity, and the weight of your mental illnesses and how they can feel like a weight on your shoulders. And her kind of thinking about, well, if I would have been on the moon, would my, like, the weight of my problems and the weight of my mental illness be 1/6, like the gravity on the moon, versus the gravity on Earth. There's also the song Narcissism, really interesting melodies too. I want to listen to it as a rock version too. I think that it would be really interesting. She had like a rock version in one of her live performances. I wish we could listen to a rock performance in a recorded form. Sunny is a bop, a really nice song, very summery, you know. And Borderline is a song that's about her borderline personality disorder. And I really like her as a person. She definitely, like, she came from a very difficult family situation, and she had to support her siblings, and they didn't really have any support that they could have gotten from anywhere else, and she kind of stepped up at the age of like 13 or something like that. And she's got this disorder that she speaks about very openly. She spoke about it on like national television, and it's not spoken about that often in South Korea, so it's very brave of her to do that, and I think that all of you should go and listen. She's so great, come on. Anyway, she's great. That's what I wanted to say. Okay, so now a little bit of just like a random chat kind of portion. So first of all, I've been getting brands that are reaching out to me to work together and whatever, and they wanted to like sponsor me or something like that. And tell me why all of those companies are extremely not eco-friendly, let's say that way, or have really bad working conditions, and then they reach out to me and they write something in the email like, oh, we loved your last video. Are you sure you liked my last video? Which one? The one where where I used vintage clothing to make my outfits, or the one where I kind of exposed a bunch of dropshipment companies? Which one is it? I can't understand why they keep reaching out to me when they know that I mean, the thing is, I know that they just don't watch the videos, just reach out to random influencers or whatever, micro influencers. And I just don't understand what the point is, because it really made me laugh. And when they were reaching out that week when I released the dropshipment video and greenwashing video, you know, really tells you how little they do. How little research they do before they reach out to somebody and try to get them to make a video promoting them or something like that. I don't know. In any case, next topic that I wanted to address was my recent health scares. Why I wanted to talk about this is because sometimes I just kind of want to like put it out there, so if you guys are watching my videos on like constantly, just so you know why sometimes I could, like, I don't know, miss an upload or something, you know. I did my first shot of the jab on June 30th, and then I got like a lymph node enlargement on my neck, which is like not neck but like the clavicle. That's not a good spot to get it on, because usually it's not a good sign in general. It's not concerning vaccines, but concerning just general health. I have to be checking that. And then before then I was checking my thyroid, and then before that, which is, you know what, funny thing, in the beginning of me making videos, I was getting a lot of comments about just people being like, go check your thyroid. Like, I know. Why are you telling me that as if I don't know that I need to check my thyroid? In any case, I'm just letting you know about this just because I might, you know, take a few days off, which I usually don't, and like miss an upload or something, but usually I don't miss it as well. So just in case something like that happens, I'm letting you know ahead of time that sometimes I get this weird health scares out of nowhere. Thankfully, so far it hasn't been anything serious, but I need to check this lymph node situation. Yesterday I got another second dose. Go get vaccinated. I got vaccinated even though I have a lymph node enlargement, and I was kind of scared. So you do it too. It wasn't bad. the second one was actually easier for me. I'm filming this new podcast, and I got the jab yesterday, so it's fine. You will get a little bit tired, maybe some pains, like just take an Advil and you'll be fine. So don't be too worried about it. If you get the fever, it's not gonna be too high. You're just gonna knock it down with an Advil and you'll be fine. So don't be worried about it. And a little bit of a sneak peek for the next episodes. I'm really excited. I'm gonna get better and better at it. Don't worry. First of all, the next episode I'm gonna talk about super flat, because one of the questions was about super flat, and we're gonna talk about that movement. I'm gonna talk about, obviously, Takashi Murakami and whatever. Just chat about them a little bit, We're gonna talk about some Tinashe music and her whole deal with the label. We're also gonna talk about Witch the Show, WITCH. We're gonna talk about it because when I prepare for a lot of styling videos on my main channel, there's a lot of things that don't go into those videos, because the thing is, I have to watch either the entirety of the show or practically the entirety of the show. So I start having a lot of opinions about those shows, and then I don't have anywhere to share them. So I'm gonna share them here whenever I feel like it. There's gonna be a segment added for the shows. The next episode after that, we're going to talk about Gossip Girl, because there's been, the mid-season finale, and because there is a reference to a very famous artwork in the show that I want to talk about. David Wojnarowicz, I don't know if you know about him, but he's a great artist and I love his artworks. I've been to an exhibition that had a bunch of his artworks and it was great, and I'm gonna explain to you why I think that exhibition was also well done as an exhibition in terms of curatorial sense. And we're gonna talk about Caroline Polachek, because she's a great musician and I want to talk about her. That's sneak peek for the next couple of episodes. Let me know if you have any suggestions, if you have any critique, if there's something with the sound or something like that you would kind of want to help me out with by telling me what I should do to make it better. Let me know. And if you have any questions regarding art, or if you have any questions about it that you kind of, maybe it's not specifically art related, but a question that you think I can provide some kind of perspective on that you would value, because I have, maybe you want some kind of specific view and maybe I'm matching that view or something like that. Let me know. Maybe I can answer that question somewhere in the podcast. But basically a lot of things are coming up with it, and I'm really excited because it is also really fun to do, because I didn't get to express all of these things and all my interests on my main channel, so I'm gonna express them here. In any case, thank you so much for watching, for listening. I'll see you in the next podcast.